That's 100.
So we are back, man. Another episode this week of Monday Night Take, man. Hopefully, you guys are ready for tonight. We're going to be discussing, really how to understand earnings. We're right full-fledged on in earnings season. We're going to be talking about some tech stocks, but we're going to kind of recap what we've seen so far in earnings season, and we're going to talk about what's to come. So it's just me tonight. You guys send some get well wishes to TR. She's a little bit under the weather. Me myself, man, I'm dealing with the allergies, weather going back and forth. It's like hot one day, cold the next day, raining in the morning, hot in the afternoon. So, my allergies are out of whack, but I'm feeling well, vibrant. Hopefully everybody's good. And we're gonna get right into it. So let's discuss, earnings season, right? Earnings season, honestly, for me, is my favorite time, of the year, right? You get this, and it only comes 4 times a year, right? You only get it 4 times a year. So the reason why I love earnings season so much is because I feel like you learn a lot during earnings, right? When it comes to earnings season, you get to really dig deep and really listen to leadership. You get to figure out, okay, what's some of the companies that you might be invested in? What's their next plans, right? You get to take a look at them from a financial aspect. You also get to hear from leadership. So I think all those different things are just important. And those are things, I'm going to be honest with you, that I like the most. Like, I really love listening to earnings calls, right? I love being able to hear from leadership. And I love when new things get announced, right? Like, earnings season sometimes can be one of those spots where, a company says, hey, we're going to do a pivot and we're opening up a new division in our company, or we're releasing a new product, right? I kind of like those different type of surprises. And then also from an earnings season perspective as well, you can actually get discounts on companies that maybe you want to invest in long term, which I think is always good as well. Because if you think about this, right, a lot of times companies, during earnings season, their stock is going to be volatile, right? Whether that's to the upside or to the downside. So, for me, it's like, if I can get a company at a discounted price, right, that I really like long term, and am able to take advantage of it because of maybe the stock fell 10, 15% off of earnings report. Maybe that quarter wasn't so well, right? Maybe that quarter wasn't so hot. So, that's something that I like to think of in the back of my mind as well, too. Is like, man, when it comes to earnings season, I think earnings season, you just get an opportunity to just learn a lot and just to see a lot. So, want to discuss what we've seen so far here in earnings season and what's to come. So, that's pretty much the show opener. So we're gonna get right into it. Take the gloves off, and let's pretty much have a conversation here tonight. Feel free to ask some questions in the chat. Definitely like, subscribe to the Come Up Series YouTube channel if this is your first time joining us. We run shows pretty much all throughout the week now. My show, we kick things off on Monday. You got Mark on Tuesday. This is just star studded cast. What we got going on Wednesday, Thursdays. It's just like every day of the week. So definitely want to you guys make sure you guys hit that comment, drop some comments, drop some fires in the chat, and go ahead and share this thing out, send it to family members, friends, because we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff here tonight. So um one of the conversations that we talked about was the banks, right? And I think, when I pretty much stepped away, I know I wasn't, for the most part, we did have a bunch of shows in March, and I kind of was offline, in March. But while I was pretty much gone and absent, I think the number one topic was bank this, bank that, the banking industry. The banks are done. They're never coming back. This is the 2008 financial crisis. All, like, you pretty much heard all of that. And I think there was a lot of panic that came in kind of very quickly. And you seen the way certain stocks moved on the market, from a banking industry perspective. A lot of those bank stocks really took a 10, 15% type nosedive pretty quickly. Um, and some other banks fell 60, 70, some 90, 95% from their highs. So you see some of those regional banks get hit up pretty bad. And it's kind of like I always say, one thing that I realized, just I think just about Wall Street, is just like kind of always expect the opposite. So when people are kind of expecting the worst of the worst, sometimes a company can pull out the best of the best, right? And that was the case for JPM on Friday, right? Where if you think about it, JPM had its biggest 1 day gain in 2 years this past Friday off of its earnings report. And the reason why I highlight these things is because it's like a lot of times you're seeing these analysts, they're trying to get you to sell certain stocks, right? And the banking industry, you just think about it, right? There's countless of mergers that have happened, whether they're equal. There's countless of banks that have been bought out, over the past hundreds of years, right? That the banking industry has been alive the past few. And you take a look at what bank bought what bank, and how this bank did this and how this bank did that. And you think about it and ask yourself, how long have these banks actually been around? Just ask yourself, like, do you really think the government is going to let these banks necessarily fail? Or do not even just the government, right? From a government standpoint, do you overall really think that these banks um, won't continue to step in to buy other banks? And that's what I was saying. Like when you take a look at it, when these banks buy another bank that maybe getting ready to go out of business or is having some issues and just different things like that, they're buying that bank's assets, and so that bank can then take that former bank's assets and then put it under theirs and do something a lot bigger and better. And then expansion as well, expanding their footprint. It's always good to expand your footprint, especially if you're a bank that's looking to grow in different areas. So I think that, is one reason why you kind of see some of these banks, buy these smaller banks up, a lot more. So I just think those are two key things to really watch and pay attention to. Um, you know, when we're looking at the banks, we have Goldman Sachs that'll be reporting tomorrow morning, plus Morgan Stanley. So two more big banks getting ready to report. And I just look at it from my standpoint, and I'm like, y'all, man. I mean, it comes down to it, man. I mean, the banks, in my opinion, right? They've put themselves in a position where, their back was kind of a little bit against the wall this quarter, but at the end of the day, people aren't going to just be thinking about now. They're going to be thinking about the future. And so you got to ask yourself, I always I really just try to keep it simple. It's like, hey, bank's still going to be around. Yeah, it's going to still be around. No issues, right? I'm not like, and if the banks aren't around, I just think that there's more things that we have to worry about. If every bank said tomorrow, hey, we're not opening up anymore. Oh, man, it'd be, if people talk about World War III. There you go, right? So, I just look at it from that perspective. It's just like, yo, the banks would never fail. And we've seen certain banks, have this fallout, but collectively together, and you're talking about some of the top biggest banks in the world. I just continue to see the banks. I think that the banks have some more upside. I think Goldman Sachs, I think JP Morgan, I think as this banking stuff starts to pass, I think you'll see a lot of those banking stocks make a move and trend upward. So I just think it's, that's something key that I'm kind of watching and looking out for. Um, and yeah, that's what we kind of saw so far in the banking sector. And then we'll pretty much wrap up with it this week. We also saw of some financials, some more financial companies, report like State Street Corp, pulling up their numbers pretty much here today. Um, let me see. I was taking a look at State Street Corporation. I was actually taking some notes. Ticker is STT. They were actually down 10% today. So I was actually reading their report actually this morning when it actually came out. And State Street Corporation, they actually missed. their earnings. So they ended up missing their earnings and the stock fell 10%. So they one of the things that they highlighted though was a lot of people, a lot of deposit. Uh, you kind of heard deposit flight. Obviously, people meet taking their money out of the banks. That happened a lot last quarter. Um, and State Street took a 9.18% drop today. So STT, that's State Street. It is off of its high from 52-week high, which is 94, 52-week low, which is 58. But if you look the past 6 months, it's still up 13%. Past 5 years, though, it's down 28%. But all time, it is up 38,000%. So think about that. State Street Corporation all time is up 38,000%. And these are the type of things that I talk about, man. I think sometimes I wish I wish them shows that we see time travel. I wish that time travel was real, because I know right now if I could be able to time travel back to the 1970s, man, there would be a lot of things that I would go ahead and snatch up and grab up that were $1 or $2 and load the boat, as they say. So, but nah, State Street Corporation did want to highlight that. They did fall almost 10% today after a missed earnings. So, I think we'll see a little bit more of that fallout in the banks, but we'll see tomorrow. Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, they're on deck, and they'll have to answer. So let's get ready to see. So that's part of that with earnings season. You get, I think a lot of times you always see the two things that you're probably going to always see first when it comes to earnings season is EPS and revenue, right? Earnings per share and revenue, which are two main important things. But I also want to highlight something which I think is just as important. Like, it's cool for a company to show, hey, we did this quarter, we made this much, we spent this much, all of that good stuff. But really, a lot of times investors want to know, what's coming in the future. That's a lot of times what people want to know. A lot of times people want to know what's coming in the future. They're, not looking to only focus just on that quarter, right? They want to see, okay, how have you been performing? Not just this quarter, but how are you telling us you're going to perform for the rest of the year, right? Those estimates can be very vital when it comes to the stock's movement on an earnings day, right? I think that's something that's super, super, super duper important to highlight, because when you're taking a look at a stock from on earnings day, right? When the stock goes ahead and reports earnings, right, you have the opportunity to be able to tap in, listen to the earnings call, and there's certain things that are going to be dissected. Guidance is going to be key. You always hear that term, guidance. So what are you going to do the next quarter? But also outside of guidance, because I think guidance gets talked about a lot too. Also, some things that I like to pay attention to and listen to is spend. I think spend is key. I want to figure out, okay, what is the cost? What is your operating cost? What do your margins look like? Which I think is important. Your operating margin, right? I think that's super, super duper important for a company, right? To highlight and talk about them from an operating procedural standpoint. What is the cost of doing business, right? Is there some, is there is there really something that's happening in the road right now that could be putting a dent on your margins? A lot of times when you see stocks struggle financially, it's because something has changed with the business from a margin standpoint, right? There could have been increased costs, right? For example, one of the reasons with Tesla, right, people are concerned, people do have some concerns with, okay, they're making all these price cuts, what effect does that have on their margins, right? Not just their top line, but also their bottom line, right? So you have those different things that investors are going to be able to take a look at and be able to see, right? And then you also have, there's a difference. You have diluted and you also have a regular EPS. So, right, that's important for you to understand and pay attention to is sometimes the numbers that you may be getting, they might be either diluted or they might be at just a regular EPS. So that's key for you to like always look at as well. Now let's discuss it. Like, let's really break all of this stuff down. Why is this stuff key and important in earnings season? And you probably see some of these terms, and I just want to make sure that pretty much everyone understands, what's actually being reported, right? Um, you also have things like revisions, right? So when we think about the revisions, um, analysts weigh in, and analysts go ahead and they weigh in their opinion over, what they believe a EPS is going to be, right? Or what they believe a revenue is going to be, or what they believe a product sales is going to be. For example, with Apple, it may be how many units were sold. For Tesla, it may be how many cars are delivered, right? That's, just to kind of give you an example. Every company kind of has its, what I would say, every company has its measuring stick, right? Every company has its measuring stick when it comes to earnings. For someone like Netflix, it may be new subscribers. For Facebook, it's going to be ad revenue. Google, it's going to be ad revenue, right? So you had that kind of same thing moving back and forth, where there's kind of always one focus point. Every company kind of has its one focus point. For Apple, we know it's going to be them iPhone units, right? And as we go down the line, you're going to see that all of those companies have that one focus point that people are going to point to. So it's not just going to be the numbers, but it's also going to be that one focal point. Because what you can see happen is you can see a company may come out and beat their earnings per share and may come out and beat their revenue. But if they miss on that one focal point that investors are paying attention to the most, well, the stock can still go down, right? So that's one thing that I've learned throughout earnings season is, the kind of the same stuff repeats itself over and over again. What happens is that, you have these companies that are actually going ahead and, reporting their earnings. And when they're reporting their earnings, they have to not only report their earnings, but they have a duty to shareholders to disclose, um not just those earnings, but they have a duty to these shareholders to disclose their next plans, right? And so that guidance, that's where that guidance comes in key. And what happens is that if a company doesn't give guidance, sometimes that can be seen as a sign of weakness, right? And usually in tough quarters, that's where you see a lot of times companies say, "Hey, we don't want to put out any forward guidance here this quarter," right? Companies that when they're performing well, I mean, they have no problem putting out guidance. They're like, "Yo, we'll do it. Got no problem at all." They're like, "Yo, we gonna put it out, no issues at all." They want to get ahead. They like, "Yo, we want everyone to know the good news." Companies when they withdraw guidance, that's something that can be frowned upon. So that's something that can be frowned upon. So if you see a company this earnings season withdraw guidance, probably their stock is going to be down after hours, right? So you keep that in mind when it comes to earnings season. Now we're gonna get into some more. So top tech stocks to watch, right? In here in 2023, earnings season in full effect, and I think one thing that's in focus. I know that this was announced. I believe it was over the weekend, but then it started. I think I seen it. I think started to see it. I think yesterday, and then today it was kind of like confirmed. But SMH did a 2-for-1 split, I believe. But they haven't done it yet, but they're planning to do it. Um, One industry that I believe is key to watch, especially this earnings season, I believe the chip sector, the chip space. I think they have the biggest shoes to fill, and particularly a company like Nvidia. And the reason why I say Nvidia has big shoes to fill is because Nvidia has really ran. It's crazy, right? The market is nowhere near all time high. Nvidia's ran from its low at 110 all the way to 27. It hit a high, excuse me, of 280, right? So it went from 120 all the way to hitting a high of 280. And it's kind of crazy to think about it, right? To see Nvidia have climbed all these steps and rallied back, it's like, man, right? You took a look, you look back, you like, man, Wasn't Nvidia just at 110? Wasn't it just at 120? And then next thing you know, it's at 280, right? So the semiconductor industry has big shoes to fill. And the reason why I'm saying that is anytime a sector runs hot and rampant, right, and earnings is coming up, that's a huge opportunity for you to be able to see, hey, now as this company actually lived up to the reason why the stock went from 120 to 280. So they got some shoes to fill. I know from right now, if I'm looking at some of the bigger time frames from a technical perspective, I can kind of see a little bit of weakness coming in some of the semiconductor names like a TSM or a Qualcomm. Even Nvidia, AMD have kind of been sideways and look like they might start to trend down. So I think those are important stocks this earnings season. You want to see how they really perform because I think that will be the part of the market where they're going to really have to blow away investors. They're really going to have to blow away investors in order for their stock to move higher. They're going to have to blow investors away. Now, am I doubting? I won't say that. I think the semiconductor space, there's a reason why it's been on fire. And I think people. I know that it was tough. If you look at the semiconductor space, it was tough, man, in 2022. I mean, you saw stocks like AMD hit 164, and then literally they were sitting at 55, 164, sitting at to go all the way from 164 to 55, right? And then you take a look at Nvidia, high of 340 back to 110. It's like, yo, they was right in line with Facebook, right? When it came to some of the worst performing stocks last year. Um, and it's kind of you looking at it, you like, man, it's like, why did it you're taking a look at it and you're like, yo, why did it go up as much as it did? Well, I think we're gonna get some answers as the chip space goes ahead and reports earnings. So I'm excited for that. I think also tech stocks, man, you never can go wrong. When you take a look at some of those other tech stocks, I think now getting in, I think now you're seeing more. I think you'll see more and more cybersecurity stocks catch a bid. I think you'll see a lot of those cloud computing stocks, be able to catch a bid. So names like Palo Alto Network, names like Snowflake, names like CRM, these are names that I think will be, more they'll be able to move higher in the future as well too. So I just think, when you take a look at all of that and you put all of that in a box, in a bubble, these tech stocks here right now in 2023, they're providing great opportunities. And I think earnings season gives them a catapult to be able to, hey, showcases, like show me what you're working with, right? I think that's the mindset of a lot of these tech companies. And here in this earnings season, investors, I think it'll be a little bit different than the past couple of years, which we've kind of seen. I think some people are like, yo, we're gonna take a little bit of a I think one thing that's happened is investors are not going to how do I say that? I don't think investors are going to be as aggressive, and expectations I think will be limited. And the reason why I say that is, like, if you paid attention to earnings seasons over the past 2 years, in 2020, because all of these companies were firing on all cylinders, like people was like, yo, we expect you to do that every quarter, every quarter, every quarter, every quarter. And when you don't do it, there's gonna be we're gonna sell. Whereas I think now people understand, okay, this is not that same market as 2020. We're not in the same, the market is not in the same positions that it was. So people are going to be looking at the market from this standpoint and saying, hey, even if there's some EPS misses, right? Because this stock is down to a certain point, we still want to take advantage of it, right? And I'm looking at one thing that I look at is I look at price behavior. So right now, when you're looking at a lot of these tech stocks, they're literally just trading sideways. They're not really going up nor really going down. So that tells me that there's two things. that tells me that there's not enough buyers really to make this thing make no all-time high and really rally it to the top. But it also shows me that there's not even enough sellers to push it really further down. So it kind of gives me the belief that there's a lot of indecision, right? There's a lot of indecisiveness. And when I take a look at this indecisiveness, this sideways action, choppy action, this movement side to side, it just provides you a longer time frame to be able to go ahead and actually get vested. So I think I'll be honest with you. I think that's super, super, super duper important. Um, I think that's where I see, like I said, in the tech space, I see a bunch of opportunities, even with the smaller tech stocks, cloud computing space. I know Uncle Charles is on here. Names like Snowflake, right? I think names even like CRM. I think they have good potential, potentially long term, right? I think names in just overall in the cloud computing space, but also cybersecurity, Palo Alto Network. And a lot of times these names, I will say this, in earnings season, these names sometimes fall underneath the radar because they're not reporting at first. They don't, these names, you probably won't see them report till the end of May, right? Or beginning of June. So they report after all the big tech, right? And they report after all of the banks go, all of these other stocks go. So sometimes they can be a little bit underrated and it can kind of fall underneath the radar. So you'd be like, oh man, why is that stock up 10% today? And you didn't even realize it had earnings because it's quiet. It's kind of towards the tail back half of earnings season. So I think those are things that I'm excited for. Even this earnings season is like, yo, I'm really, really, really excited to pay attention to those bigger, you know, tech stocks, but also some of these smaller tech stocks are just as important to me, just as important to me, because what are going to be the names that lead us into the future? What are going to be the names that really that really start to matter to us more and more, right? Like those are the things that I'm paying attention to. I'm looking for these outliers, right? I'm looking for these pure winners. I want to identify a winner, right? I want to identify a winner during earnings season. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for things that I'm looking to do. Listen to earnings calls. I love listening to earnings calls. Once again, I said in the beginning, being able to hear from leadership. You don't get that all the time, right? Elon Musk, you had the pleasure of him hopping on a Twitter space every now and then, right? But a lot of these other leaders, and not just the CEOs, when I say leaders, we're talking about people that's in the head department of, we're talking about CFOs, COOs, right? We're talking about people that are in charge, and they work for you at the end of the day. Those people in those positions at those companies, they have a responsibility to deliver for you. So they work for you. So when I'm listening to, these earnings calls, I'm looking at overall, number one, I want to see what direction are we going. I also want to see if they're like, and it kind of goes hand in hand with direction, but what are the next projects? Like what's next, right? What are those next projects? So direction, projects, those two kind of go hand in hand, right? And then, managing expectations. I just think when it comes to even this quarter, right? I don't believe anyone's gonna think that this quarter is gonna be a blowout. Like no one's like, man, this quarter is gonna be a blowout earnings. Companies are gonna come in and blow these earnings out. I don't think anybody's thinking like that right now. And I think the fact that no one's thinking like that. I think those are usually the times when earnings season, when kind of everyone is expecting things to be bad, usually earnings season ends up being pretty decent. When everyone's expecting things to be good, that's when earnings season kind of, gets a little bit rough and you see certain stocks fall more than what was expected. So, that was key for me to highlight. Now, let's relapse to last quarter, right? And pretty much take a look at what happened. So I'll be honest with you guys. I mean, for the most part, there was really only one big tech stock that really performed super well. Excuse me, actually two. Take that back, two. There was two stocks that were in kind of like big tech that actually performed well. on off of their earnings, and that was actually Tesla, and then also Meta Platforms. Both of those companies actually went up, about 10-15%, either the evening of or the next couple of sessions after. Like I remember Tesla ran from like last quarter ran from like 140 and ran I think to like 190, and like I want to say it was like three or four sessions. Meta Platforms was up 20% after hours. So I think it was up like at one point it was up like $40, like 40-50 bucks, right? Because it was approaching like 195, and then it came from like I want to say it was like 152 or 147. Got to take a look back at the charts. So yeah, when you're thinking about that, guys, like really just keep your eyes on some of these bigger tech names. From the standpoint of like, hey, those are good. That's what's going to really set the tone. Because to be honest with you, however, usually the banks and then big tech leads, right? However, they usually start reporting. That's how the rest of the earnings season usually plays out. Because you got to think all these companies are interconnected, right? All of these companies are close knit, even when you think they're probably not. I mean, they might be a competitor, but these companies partner and they're super close knit. So just keep that in mind. So those tech stocks, here right now, you have the opportunity to be able to see these companies report, you like even like a Boeing, right? So not even just the tech companies. You're going to see your Dow industrial stocks go ahead and start reporting. So like a Boeing is going to go ahead and report here pretty soon. You're going to see, you already saw the banks, right? But you're going to get like a Procter and Gamble. You're going to get a Johnson and Johnson reports tomorrow morning. You're going to get a Home Depot. You're going to get a Caterpillar, right? So all of those companies that are within the Dow, they'll go ahead and start reporting as well too. So, I think those, when I take a look at those companies, man, those value names, those real value names, those value names. I mean, it's hard to it's hard for those companies to really miss, man. It's hard for those companies, those household essentials, as somebody will say. It's hard for those companies to necessarily really miss, like a Procter and Gamble. Ask yourself, not that is Procter and Gamble a bad company? Nah, it's not. It's hard for those type companies to lose. Um, some names that I think I'm excited to even see that are kind of underneath the radar. I want to see Costco. I think Costco is always a good stock to measure the economy by, right? Costco, I mean, so many people spend, even people here watching tonight. For those that go to Costco, I'm not a Costco goer myself, really. I think I prefer. I mean, I won't say I prefer. I would prefer Costco. I like Sam's though too. It's pretty much the same thing though. If you're in the grand scheme of things, but I think Costco has a little bit better service, customer service, and I think a name like Costco is something that sometimes can even fall underneath the radar during earnings season. I think Costco, Walmart, Target are also good stress. If there was like little stress tests, right? I think it's a good, if you combine those three data together and was making decisions based on the data that you have. I think the data would support just how important all three of those companies one are, but just the kind of like the different factors. Like when you take a look at those particular companies, you gotta put those together, right? You gotta group those companies, those Dow names together, right? Those Dow names that are going to go ahead and report. Those reports come out strong. It's firing on all cylinders. The Dow last week, I think it was on Friday, the Dow was approaching 34,000, right? So it was approaching 34,000. The Dow, right, was approaching 34,000. How amazing was that, right? How amazing was it to see that? Um, and when you had those value names come out, start reporting, that can really be a catalyst that pushes the market up. The banks finishing off their part of earnings season strong, that can rally the market, right? Historically, when you're taking a look at May, a lot of you might start to hear this saying a little bit more, but you've heard it saying, sell in May and go away, right? And it can be true. I know a lot of people try to always get into the seasonality. Seasonality is important. But it's not always a guarantee, right? It's not always a guarantee that, something is going just because it did this last year that's going to do this here again. So, I wanted to, keep everyone in line when it came to that. What I would say personally, um, my stocks that I'm looking forward the most is going to be Meta platforms. And some of you guys have heard me talk about Meta before. Um, we had this whole Meta, Facebook, whatever you is dead. There was like a whole campaign behind that Facebook would never recover. Meta lost its way. Mark Zuckerberg, excuse me, not Zuckerberger. Mark Zuckerberg, is done. They're exiting him out. And it's just like, yo, I think that this quarter, man, I think that this quarter belongs to Meta. And I think they'll stake their claim. Because some people was even saying, yo, Meta needs to be removed from the top tech stock, remove them from Fang, right? All of that stuff, right? And when you take a look at Meta, we got to give a round of applause to Meta because Meta's done something, in my opinion, that's very unique. Um, and it reminds me a lot of the move that they made um, with stories. Because you think about it, I was having this conversation the other day with my wife, and we was like, yo, when you take a look at Snapchat, Snapchat developed a lot of stuff that Instagram is using right now, right? Instagram just took it and just made it better, right? Because if you think about it, Snapchat was really hot. They were the ones that had stories. Instagram and Meta, right? Meta did not have stories. They seen Snapchat did it. They took it, made it better, right? They enhanced it. And so kind of similar to what we saw with I don't think when Elon Musk and Twitter when they did the verification bags, I don't think it went over really well. I don't think it was properly organized. But I also don't think that people were just too I don't think people were too like, oh man, I need to have the blue check on Twitter. I don't think people was as not saying that people didn't get it, but I don't think it was as hype where it's like, okay, the blue check is $15 a month on Instagram. Yo, if there ever was a digital drug, it would be the blue check. Because I just think I think for one, everyone wants it, right? And so what a smart business move, right, from Meta platforms to realize, hey, there's another revenue opportunity for us. We know, like, because if you think about it, like Meta platforms has really been getting hit up hard by Apple, their privacy stuff, it's taking a dent on their earnings, all that different stuff. So it's been some issues. It's been a couple tough quarters, right, in a row. Meta platforms, I mean, it fell from 380 all the way to 88, $87, right? So it was rough. Like it was really, really, really rough. And Meta platforms got hit super, super, super hard. Now we've seen them rally back. The reason why this quarter is important because this can be a catalyst to move higher. Those numbers and how they're going to report, this could be a huge quarter where I think that Meta has the chance, if and when it's all said and done, I think that Meta can actually find its way, actually making itself and moving itself all the way back up. I think that Meta can find itself and move all the way to the top. I think that Meta can move to about, if it gets over 229, I think it's going to 245. And then after 245, I think that there's a chance. There's a chance. And this is a bold prediction, right? And I don't think this will happen necessarily fast. But I do think that 245 can come if the numbers look right and if the guidance is good. But there's a chance that Meta could be going back because there's a huge gap in between 245 and 290. There's a huge $45 gap that was created in January of 2022, right? So when Meta, whatever died, fell off a cliff, it was done, it was whatever, Mark is never going back on top, all of that stuff, right? Um, it created a huge gap when the earnings miss. And earnings season was really the catalyst to bring Meta down, and I think earnings season will be the catalyst to bring Meta up and back up. So I think it's incredible opportunity. I mean, Facebook is just you just can't count it out, man. You just really can't. Amazon, big tech, and I know we talk a lot about these big tech companies a lot. Um, Amazon, I think, hmm, I think Amazon's gonna have a soft quarter this quarter. I think it'll be soft. Um, it's not always their best or biggest quarter for the most part too, so you gotta keep that in mind. So I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised at all um, to see Amazon have a pretty much a flat quarter, um, and kind of similar with Google as well too. I wouldn't be surprised to see both of those companies have a flat quarter. They didn't necessarily have a blowaway earnings. And even Apple, I don't think Apple will have necessarily a blowaway earnings. So I think for the most part, I think most of the big tech companies will kind of have a, I won't say a bad. I don't think they'll have bad quarters, but I don't necessarily think they'll have breakout quarters either. I think their quarters would be flat. So I think earnings season for the most part for big tech, I think it'll be flat. I think you'll have stellar performers like a Meta, but I think that will be pretty much it from a stellar performer perspective. Um, so that is another thing. You have to keep your eyes on is even not just the day of earnings, right? But pay attention to the weeks that come after, because a lot of times what happens is that certain stocks make moves, right, the day of earnings, right? But then you come back like 2 weeks later and be like, man, maybe this stock fell off their earnings report, right? They fell down, but then you actually come back to that stock and you see that it started to move higher, right? And you started seeing its rally after the earnings came out, and that's what I call like an earnings reversal, right? Just because something may start off bad doesn't mean that it's going to end bad. Just because something started off bad doesn't mean that it's going to end bad. And I always kind of have people kind of like keep that in the back of their minds, is because what happens is that during earnings season there's a lot of shuffling too. There's a lot of reorganization of positions. um, there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that necessarily you might not see, just with the naked eye. So I also would tell people to, if you do miss the earnings calls, go back and listen, right? Take a look at the earnings transcripts. Sites and resources that I really like to use a lot are things like Seek and Alpha and Tip Ranks. Those are two apps. Seeking Alpha and Tip Ranks, man, is well, for the most part, I was using Seeking Alpha in the beginning part of my process. Wasn't using Tip Ranks as much here, and kind of probably very sparingly. But Seeking Alpha is an app you can download it on the App Store. Seeking Alpha is crazy because it was actually when I was using it in the beginning, it was actually free. Now they have a subscription. You can kind of read a few articles, but then they make you buy the subscription. When I first started with Seeking Alpha, it was completely free, and it was just amazing to me to be able to see, a platform like a Seeking Alpha offer an earnings preview, right? Earningswhispers.com is another good resource to take a look for yourself to be able to, when you're trying to look at, different data for certain companies that are getting ready to report earnings. All right. But for me, it's Seeking Alpha, man. And it's been that way, forever. Seeking Alpha always has an earnings preview that comes out at 5:30 p.m. EST, every day before earnings. The day before earnings, you'll usually get an earnings preview at 5:30 p.m. And that earnings preview can include anywhere from, different estimates, different analyst price targets, different things like that. So, and that's the one thing that you want to watch is price target increases and decreases. Price target increases and decreases can, for the most part, they can pretty much happen. I'll be honest with you guys, they can pretty much happen at any time, but they happen a lot usually the day. Well, they happen a lot usually the day after earnings. Usually, for the most part, everyone upgrades. Well, not upgrades, updates your price target, which can either be an upgrade or a downgrade, right? Um, and then you usually see it kind of heavy as well, like usually 2 to 4 weeks before the earnings report. so they can kind of give guidance ahead of time on what their current position or is when it comes to expectations for the company, price targets, etc. And then they usually update it after those numbers come out. So pay attention now, because if you understand that your certain stock you might be looking at has earnings in 10 days, well, you might be seeing a couple right then and there, maybe that day or maybe a few days before or whatever. You're going to be able to see that there was analysts reporting on that stock, and either they were revising the estimates higher, they were keeping it the same, or lowering them. See, a lot of times when analysts lower earnings expectations, right? A lot of times when analysts lower earnings expectations, that makes it easier for these companies to come out here and beat earnings, right? Like the earnings revision, I think is super important to pay attention to, because companies could come out with estimates and there could be a consensus that was saying, hey, we expected $1.03 per share. But then what happens is that revisions get made. So let's say they're expecting a rough, analysts are kind of expecting a less of a quarter than what they thought before. What happens is they kind of like lowball the numbers. What happens is they'll say, okay, cool. Well, we're expecting, you know, we're expecting $1.30 EPS to be reported. That was our original projection, but let's lower that estimate. Let's revise that to maybe $1.20. Now, let's say that company comes out and does $1.25. Everyone say, "Oh, well, they beat, they beat, they beat." And that's another part to pay attention to, is those revisions, because things can change. One resource that I like to use for that is for the revisions is Yahoo Finance, right? I think they do a good job of really highlighting those revisions, and it can be revised upward or downward, right? And those price targets increases and decreases can happen all the time. I believe someone down, I couldn't remember, it came across my deck super early, but I know, for example, like someone, one of the analysts had lowered the price target for Tesla, right? So, when you see these price target increases and decreases, they can have an effect on the stock price, that given day. So keep that in mind, right? That can have an effect, on your actual, that you can actually see. So, um, yeah. So, what I would say, guys, is, as we get ready to wrap this thing up, I know you guys can hear me sniffling and stuff. And definitely shout out to the cause TR. Hopefully she's feeling better soon, and appreciate everyone tapping in. First and foremost, man, um, like I want to give you guys the things that I'm looking forward to, and looking at super heavy. So we talked about the banks a lot, but guess what? The banks, that's going to be done and over with. We talked about, companies like Meta Platforms. You're going to have your Netflixes and your Teslas that are going to kick off tech earnings season. But I think for me, one thing that you kind of even saw last week is like, the market got excited when inflation was lower than what was expected. The market actually jumped. I think I seen the SPY up $3 or $4, and then the market kind of opened, then it sold off, right? And I think it turned negative. Yeah, it turned negative that day. And I think a large part of it, I'll be honest with you, is just like, once again, expectations, right? Expectations is an important part of not just earnings season, but just really just in totality, how the market is going to move, how certain stocks are going to go up and down. Expectations, right? What are those expectations, right? And I think when it comes to this earnings season, I don't believe that the expectations are really high. So if a company comes out and beats barely, you may see a run up, right? There's more than likely something that can happen. So I'm watching, like I said, I'm watching names like Meta Platforms. The banks already reported. I'm watching names even like a Netflix, a Tesla. A big tech definitely has to be on watch, but that's cool. But I want to see what Salesforce does this quarter. I want to see what Snowflake does. I want to see those other smaller cybersecurity names and other smaller tech companies. I want to see what they're doing, because those are going to be some of the names that when we come back 5, 10, 15, 20 years, like everyone everyone talks about Apple now, but no one's talking about, yo, when Apple didn't even have their first iPhone. And I think it's sometimes as a long-term investor, we can get discouraged as well too. It's easy, man, because it's like sometimes a lot of times our stock is not going to be moving up at a drastic rate. Even if you think about it, right? What was this? What was the stock? It was State Street, right? Like I pull it up, their stock chart, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, this thing was $1 in the mid 70s. But you got to think it was $1 in the mid 70s, but right now it's $72 with a all time high of $96. So to be fair, it's like this, right? When you take a look at something like a State Street Corporation, you're thinking this was a dollar in the mid 70s. So you got to think, like, if you do the math on that, you're talking about basically it took about 40 to 50 years to even get to this point where it's at now from a price perspective. So, you don't want to really discount long term, because you never truly know how, where things can go. Right. So I think that's super, super, super duper important for me to highlight and say. Like I said, earnings season, three things that I want everyone to do this week. Number one is I want you to go ahead and tap into an earnings call if you can. Some resources, some things. So let's say you can't tap in live, right? The earnings call replays are usually always available on the company's website, um, under their investors tab and relations. But underneath the company website, you should be able to get at least a transcript. If not, you should be able to listen to the audio after. If not, you can tap into YouTube, because YouTube does a great job as well. So you guys are on YouTube now. Just change the things that you subscribe yourself to, right? I mean, there's countless of CEOs, speaking at their individual, conference press conferences and earnings season, and just giving updates overall on their giving those updates overall on their company. So I just think, at that point, it's just like, yo, man, you got to really look at it and just say, hey, those are the little details that I think you just sometimes we can kind of overlook, those little small details. So like I said, man, understanding earnings, it's a lot that goes into these reports too. So there's a lot of things that sometimes may fall underneath the radar. You may just not see it on the regular scene. So that's where I think we're at with it. Um, like I said, running into earning season here now. Big tech is I think, at least for the most part, I think it's going to be flat, just because I think some of the biggest names will kind of be flat. But I think one of the outperformers will be Meta Platform. So those are the things that I'm looking at. So next week, man, I'm going to be bringing on another guest. So definitely super, super, super duper excited for that. Tiara will be back. Definitely send some prayers her way. Wasn't feeling well. And as you guys can see, man, my allergies is kicking my butt. So, like I said, yo, it's always good. Super excited to always be here on the Come Up series, man. Shout out to my good brother Mark Monroe, Jolynn, and everyone that we have on this channel. I just feel like, yo, it's just so much information, to give and to talk about. Um, I'm excited to I want to continue to bring this show on the road. So I think pretty soon you guys will be seeing you never know. A Monday Night Take episode could be in your city. You just never know what could happen. So like I said, man, I'm just, like I said, super, super duper excited. Earnings season is always a good time. You got your certain tech stocks I think are getting ready for some good breakouts if earnings season pretty much bodes well. The banks so far have been, you've had a couple misses. We talked about things like State Street. So yeah, man, it's just those little details, paying attention to the little details makes, a lot of stuff a lot easier. So, definitely wanted to say I appreciate y'all for being here with me tonight. Hopefully everyone gets a good night of rest. This was another episode of Monday Night Take. Next week we're back. Again, new topic. And we're going to be talking about it. So I only gave you one thing. I lost my train of thought for a second. Two more things. Another thing I want you guys to do, outside of just listening to the earnings call, I want you to actually study a company's leadership. And when I say study the company's leadership, I want you to do some research on the people that are actually, you know, running that company. That could be a founder of maybe a different product that might sit on the board, right? Could be a vice president, right? But just really start to dig deep into who's actually on those boards. So that'll be another assignment that I would assign. And this is just kind of for yourself. And then also, lastly, I will brush up on your technicals. We're gonna go back to the charts next week. So we're gonna pull up a lot of charts next week. So yeah, super excited for the person I bring on next week to already be back. So next week, just get ready, have that trading view ready, sharpen up on them technicals, man, and we're gonna get to it. So I'm appreciative of y'all, man. Hopefully everyone has a great night. Um, and I know it's we got a lot. I know some people got different basketball teams. Shout out to the Lakers, man. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't give my good brother Mark Monroe and congratulations on winning game one. Shout out to LeBron and the Lakers. They closed it out. Game one out. Let's see what they do. But yeah, man. Shout out to good brother Mark Monroe. I know he's a big LeBron fan. And if your team's still in the race, congratulations. So yeah, I appreciate y'all, and I will see you guys next week. Peace out.